The millionaire walked slowly along the cold, quiet cemetery, his polished shoes crunching softly on the gravel path. The sky was gray, and a light wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the faint smell of flowers and damp earth. Today was one of those days he always dreaded, the anniversary of his wife's death, and yet, he had to come, even though memories of the past made him ache inside. He stopped in front of a large marble gravestone, gently touching the engraved letters with a trembling hand. The name on the stone brought back a flood of memories, smiles, laughter, arguments, and the moments that he could never get back. He remembered her voice, soft but firm, always reminding him of the promises they made to each other when life seemed simple and full of hope. As he stood there, lost in thought, he didn't notice the small figure at the edge of the cemetery. A boy, no older than 16, dressed in torn clothes and dirty shoes, sat silently on a nearby bench. His eyes were fixed on the millionaire, though he tried to hide it behind the hood of his worn-out jacket. The boy had been following him for a long time, learning his habits, studying his routines, always in the shadows, invisible. But today he had made a decision. Today he would speak. Today he would face the man who had abandoned him years ago. The boy remembered the night his mother had died, how he had been left alone, how the millionaire had promised he would return but never did. Those words had been the only warmth he had ever known, but they had turned into emptiness, and that emptiness had grown with every passing year. He had learned to survive on the streets, stealing small amounts of food, begging for coins, hiding from people who could hurt him. He had grown stronger in ways the millionaire could never imagine, but the pain of being forgotten never left him. It was a shadow that followed him everywhere, a shadow that whispered, "He doesn't care, he never cared." Meanwhile, the millionaire leaned against the gravestone, staring at the sky as if the clouds could carry away his regrets. He had become a man of wealth and influence, but those achievements felt hollow at moments like this. Money could buy comfort, luxury, and respect, but it could not bring back what he had lost. It could not bring back his wife. It could not repair the bridges he had burned, and it could not erase the faces of the people who had mattered to him when he was younger. He often wondered if he had made the right choices, if ambition had cost him more than success ever gave him. The boy watched him closely, noticing the way he flinched at the memories, the small sighs that escaped his lips, and the sadness that he could not hide. There was a strange connection between them, a thread of the past that refused to be broken. The boy wanted to reach out, to shake him, to shout, "Do you remember me?" But fear and doubt held him back. What if the millionaire did not recognize him? What if he rejected him again? Those questions ran through his mind, but he could not stay silent any longer. He had to know if the man he had longed for all these years still had a place in his heart, even if only a small one. The cemetery was unusually quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Birds chirped in the distance, and the wind rustled the leaves, but inside, time seemed to stand still. The millionaire continued to stare at the gravestone, oblivious to the boy's presence. Lost in a mixture of grief and memories, the boy thought about the first time he had seen his father, a man so full of life and promise, yet so blind to the needs of the child who had been left behind. He remembered the tiny hands reaching out, the questions that were never answered, and the nights spent crying alone under a thin blanket. These memories were sharp and painful, but they were also what gave him courage. They reminded him why he had to speak, why he had to confront the past no matter how terrifying it seemed. Finally, the boy took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the years press down on him. He stood up slowly, trying to make his presence known without startling the millionaire. Every step on the gravel felt like a lifetime, and every heartbeat echoed loudly in his chest. Meanwhile, the millionaire turned slightly, sensing a movement, but not expecting anything to disturb the solemn quiet of the cemetery. The boy's mind raced, remembering the first words he would say, the ones that could change everything. He had rehearsed them countless times, but now, in the silence of the cemetery, they seemed both powerful and fragile. It was a moment suspended between past and future, between regret and hope. The millionaire did not know it yet, but the encounter about to happen would shake the foundations of his carefully built life. It would bring back forgotten memories, challenge his choices, and force him to confront the man he had become. The boy, despite being small and fragile-looking, carried the weight of years of pain, longing, and unanswered questions, and now, standing just a few steps away, he was ready to step out of the shadows and into the moment that had been waiting for him for more than a decade. The cemetery, cold and quiet, seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the first words to be spoken. The millionaire, still unaware of what was coming, touched the gravestone once more, wishing he could change the past, never knowing that the past had just walked up beside him, ready to demand attention, ready to make him face what he had tried to forget. The boy's heart pounded, and his eyes filled with both fear and determination. This was the forgotten past meeting the present, and nothing would ever be the same again. The boy had been standing at the edge of the cemetery for what felt like hours, his small hands trembling slightly, clutching the worn hood of his jacket. He had watched the millionaire from a distance, memorizing the lines on his face, the slow, careful movements, the way he held himself as if the weight of the world rested on his shoulders. Every detail mattered because this was the moment he had imagined for years. The moment that could finally bring answers, relief, or perhaps more pain. Finally, he stepped forward, his footsteps cautious but deliberate. Each crunch of gravel under his shoes echoed in the stillness, as if announcing his arrival to the world. He drew in a deep breath, tasting the cold, damp air, and tried to steady the racing of his heart. The millionaire, lost in memories of the past, barely noticed the figure approaching, absorbed in the grief and regret that clung to him like shadows. The boy stopped a few steps away, his voice barely above a whisper at first. "You don't recognize me, I'm your child." The words hung in the air, fragile yet sharp, slicing through the silence of the cemetery like a sudden gust of wind. The millionaire froze, his eyes widening, his hand tightening on the gravestone. He stared at the boy, disbelief flickering across his face, confusion mixing with a rising sense of unease. For a moment, neither spoke, the tension stretching between them, thick and almost suffocating. The boy's gaze did not waver. He looked straight into the millionaire's eyes, searching for recognition, for any hint that the man remembered him. The millionaire's mind raced, flashes of the past colliding with the present, fragments of memories he had long buried suddenly resurfacing, tiny hands, laughter in the living room, a face he had never fully forgotten but had tried desperately to ignore. The boy took a cautious step closer, feeling the cold wind tug at his jacket, but determined to remain steady. "I'm the child you left behind," he said, his voice firmer now, "the one you promised to take care of, the one you forgot, the one who waited." His words were raw, honest, filled with the pain of years spent wondering why he was abandoned, yet also carrying the courage it had taken to finally confront the man who had shaped his life without ever being there. The millionaire's breathing quickened, his knuckles white as he gripped the gravestone. He wanted to speak, to deny, to push away the impossible truth, but the boy's presence was undeniable. The boy's eyes reflected something he had not expected: pain, yes, but also resilience, a strength born from survival, a determination that made it impossible to dismiss him as a dream or a mistake. Around them, the cemetery remained eerily still, the distant sound of a crow's call breaking the silence. Trees swayed gently, and a few fallen leaves drifted across the path. Yet in that quiet, a storm of emotions raged between father and son: shock, fear, guilt, anger, and a flicker of hope that neither fully understood yet. The millionaire's mind tried to piece together a lifetime of memories in seconds, struggling to reconcile the boy before him with the child he had once held. The boy stepped even closer, now only a few feet away, feeling the urgency of the moment. He knew he had only one chance to speak, to bridge the gap of years. "I've waited for you," he said, voice breaking slightly. "I've lived through hunger, through nights when I had no one, and I still found a way to survive. But I needed you to know who I am, to face the truth." The millionaire's eyes filled with tears he had long hidden, memories crashing over him like waves. He remembered the nights he had spent away from home, the choices he had made for wealth and comfort, the child he had left behind without realizing the depth of the consequences. And now, here he was, confronted by that very consequence, standing alive, strong, yet scarred by years of neglect. The realization hit him harder than any financial loss or business failure ever could. He had failed as a father, and the cost of that failure was embodied in the boy before him. Neither of them moved for a moment, both suspended in a space between past regrets and the uncertain future. The boy's eyes softened slightly, sensing a flicker of recognition in the millionaire's gaze, and though the millionaire could not yet find the words, something unspoken passed between them, a fragile understanding, the first step toward reconciliation. The boy had made contact with the past, and the millionaire had no choice but to face it. For the first time in years, the millionaire felt something he had long avoided: vulnerability, and the terrifying possibility of forgiveness, the boy, despite all the suffering, stood bravely, ready to demand the answers that had eluded him, and in that moment, the cemetery became more than a place of mourning. It became a place of confrontation, of truth, and perhaps the beginning of a journey neither of them would forget. The millionaire stood frozen, his hand still resting on the cold marble of the gravestone. His mind was a whirlwind, images from decades ago flooding in faster than he could process. The boy's words echoed in his ears, repeating like a drumbeat he could not escape. "I'm your child," he had said, and suddenly the years of avoidance, of ambition and distractions, came crashing down. Memories he had long buried surfaced one by one, sharp and vivid. He remembered the tiny fingers that had once clung to his own, the small voice that had asked endless questions about life, love, and family. The laughter in the morning, when the sun spilled gold across the wooden floors of their old home, seemed so distant now, yet it was impossible to forget. The millionaire's chest tightened as he recalled nights he had promised to stay, nights he had promised protection and care, only to leave for work, for business, for wealth, leaving the child behind in empty rooms that echoed with silence. He saw the boy again, not as the teenager in front of him, but as the small child he had once held. The eyes that now stared boldly at him had once looked up with trust and wonder, and the realization that he had abandoned that trust made his stomach twist. His mind remembered the day his wife had fallen ill, the arguments that had divided them, and the chaos that had consumed their lives. It had been easier to focus on work, to push away the reality of the home, to leave the child in the background, convinced someone else could care. Now, standing in the cemetery, he could see the consequences of those choices staring back at him, embodied in the boy's worn clothes, rough hands, and steady gaze. The boy had grown without guidance, without love, and yet here he was, alive, speaking the truth that the millionaire had ignored for too long. The millionaire's fingers trembled as he reached toward the boy, unsure whether to embrace or retreat, unsure whether he deserved forgiveness, unsure if it was even possible to bridge the gap of years and neglect. The boy's presence forced him to remember not only the good moments but also the mistakes, the time he had yelled in frustration when the child spilled milk on the floor, the evenings he had come home late, claiming he was too tired to talk, the holidays missed, the birthdays ignored. Each memory stabbed at his heart with guilt, and the boy's quiet courage made those memories impossible to dismiss. He could see the boy's life flash before him, piecing together a timeline from the few things he remembered. The nights the boy must have spent alone, learning to fend for himself, the hunger he endured, the loneliness that pressed on his small shoulders. The millionaire's wealth had built an empire, but it had not built a family. It had not filled the void left in the life of the child he had abandoned. And now the boy was a living reminder of everything he had failed to protect. Yet in the boy's eyes, the millionaire noticed something else: resilience, strength, and a flicker of hope. Despite everything, the child had survived, had become more than the sum of neglect and hardship, and that realization both humiliated and humbled him. The millionaire felt tears sting his eyes as he realized that no amount of apology could erase the past, but perhaps it could begin a future, a chance to make some small amends. The boy took a step closer, sensing the millionaire's inner struggle. "You don't have to say anything yet," he whispered, his voice carrying both firmness and patience. "Just remember. That's enough for now. I just needed you to know I'm here, I survived, and I'm still standing." The words hit the millionaire with the force of truth, and he knew there was no running away this time, no pretending the past didn't matter. For the first time in years, the millionaire allowed himself to feel truly, not as a businessman or a wealthy man, but as a father, flawed, guilty, and longing to repair the damage he had caused. The memories that had haunted him now merged with the boy's reality, creating a bridge, fragile but real, between the life that was lost and the one that could be rebuilt. The cemetery, once only a place of sorrow, now became a stage for recognition, for facing the truth, and for the possibility of reconciliation. As they stood together, separated by years but connected by blood, the millionaire realized that memories were not just ghosts to haunt him. They were reminders, warnings, and guides. They reminded him of what he had lost, yes, but also of what he still had the chance to regain. The boy, who had endured so much, was waiting patiently, and the millionaire knew that to move forward, he had to first face the past, embrace it, and let it teach him how to be the father he should have been. In that moment, Time seemed suspended, the past meeting the present, as both father and child stared at each other, hearts heavy with grief, yet glimmering with hope. Memories had resurfaced, sharp and vivid, but now they were no longer just painful, they were the starting point for something new, something neither of them had dared to imagine until this day. The boy looked at the millionaire for a long moment, his eyes calm but filled with memories of a lifetime lived in shadows. He had grown strong and clever, but not by choice, by necessity. Every scar on his body, every bruise hidden under layers of worn clothing, told the story of survival. He had walked streets that never smiled, slept in alleyways where the cold seeped through his thin jacket, and scavenged for food in places most people pretended did not exist. As he stood there, the boy's mind drifted back to the nights he had spent alone as a child, clutching an old, torn blanket. He had whispered to the dark sky, wishing for the father who never returned, wishing for someone to notice him, to call him by name, to tell him he mattered. Those nights were long, quiet, and often terrifying, but they had taught him to be resilient, to find small joys even in the harshest circumstances, like the warmth of sunlight on his face or the laughter of another lost child he met on the streets. He remembered the days he spent running errands for strangers in exchange for food, hiding whenever danger approached, avoiding the police, and learning to blend into the shadows. Each day was a lesson in patience, cunning, and endurance. A child who once needed guidance now learned to navigate the world alone, with only instincts and determination to guide him. Yet despite the hardships, he had never stopped thinking of the father who had left, wondering if somewhere inside, the man remembered him, wondered if somewhere, he still cared. The boy had grown not only in body but in mind, learning skills that would make survival possible. He had learned to fix small things, to bargain, to read people's expressions, and to stay invisible when danger came near. But more than that, he had learned to observe, to notice details that others missed, which is how he had found the millionaire again, studying his movements from a distance, learning his routines, and waiting for the right moment. Today was the day he had chosen, and nothing could stop him from confronting the past. But his journey was not only about survival, it was about understanding himself, his anger, and his longing. The boy often asked himself why he had been abandoned, why the man who should have protected him had disappeared from his life. He learned to carry the weight of those questions quietly, letting them fuel his strength rather than break him completely. Each hardship became a teacher, each night alone a test of courage, and each small victory, a warm meal, a safe place to sleep, a reminder that he could endure anything. He had met people on the streets who had become temporary family, other children like him, lost but surviving. They had shared stories, food, and warmth, forming a bond that gave him strength. The lessons he learned from them shaped who he was today, a boy who had seen the worst of life but refused to let it define him, who had walked through fire and emerged not broken, but cautious, wise, and ready to face the father who had abandoned him. The boy's journey had also taught him about forgiveness. Though he had not yet reached it fully, he understood that hatred could consume a person, that anger could be a trap, and that holding on to bitterness might destroy him more than it would hurt the millionaire. Yet, he was honest about his pain, standing in the cemetery as proof of years of struggle, proof that the boy who had been forgotten was still alive, still standing, and still demanding to be recognized. Looking at the millionaire now, he realized that this moment was not just a confrontation but the culmination of everything he had endured, the result of every night spent alone, every challenge he had faced, and every choice he had made to survive. He had arrived at this moment through courage and determination, the path of his journey etched on his body and heart, and now, it was time for the man who had left him to see it, to understand it, and perhaps to acknowledge it. The boy took a deep breath, letting the years of pain, struggle, and survival settle around him. He was no longer the small child who had cried silently in the dark. He was someone who had learned to face the world, to face the truth, and to face the father who had once abandoned him. The journey had been long, difficult, and lonely, but it had made him stronger, ready, and unafraid. The millionaire could no longer ignore the life he had left behind, for here it stood before him, alive, unwavering, and demanding to be seen. In the quiet of the cemetery, the boy's journey became more than survival. It became a bridge between the past and the possibility of a future, a testament to resilience, courage, and the unbreakable will to be acknowledged. The path he had walked was hard and lonely, but it had led him to this moment, and he would not turn away now. The cemetery seemed colder now, though the wind had only picked up slightly. As the boy's words lingered in the air, a storm of emotions began to swirl between him and the millionaire. It was more than surprise. It was confusion, guilt, anger, and a deep, aching sorrow that neither of them could escape. The millionaire's face shifted through a dozen expressions in seconds: shock, disbelief, fear, and finally, the sharp sting of guilt. He had imagined this moment countless times over the years, but reality was far more intense than anything he could have predicted. He wanted to speak, to apologize, to explain, but no words seemed right. No words could erase the years of neglect, the nights the boy had spent alone, the milestones missed, the childhood stolen. The boy, on the other hand, felt a surge of anger rise from the depths of his chest, a fire he had carried silently for years. He remembered every empty meal, every cold night, every time he had searched for someone who was supposed to love him, only to find absence. He wanted the millionaire to feel the weight of that absence, to understand what it had cost him, to realize that abandonment leaves scars that never fully heal. Yet beneath the anger was also a trembling hope, a fragile thread that whispered, maybe he will understand, maybe he will care, maybe this is the chance I've waited for. The boy's eyes searched the millionaire's face, trying to find a flicker of recognition, a glimmer of remorse, anything that would show he was not just confronting a stranger, but the man who had once promised to protect him. The millionaire's eyes filled with tears, and his voice cracked when he finally spoke. I don't know what to say. I remember. I remember you. The words sounded weak even to his own ears, but they were honest, laden with regret and confusion. He remembered the child, the laughter, the small hand in his own, but the years of distance had made that memory fragile, almost unreal, and now it was standing right in front of him, demanding truth. The boy's expression softened slightly, but the anger did not vanish. You left me, he said quietly, but firmly. You left me alone when I needed you the most. You were supposed to be my father, and you weren't there. His words were heavy with truth, echoing across the cemetery, hitting the millionaire harder than any business failure ever could. A wave of shame washed over the millionaire, and for a moment, he looked smaller than he ever had, not a man of wealth and power, but a flawed father facing the consequences of his choices. I was wrong, he said, the words trembling on his lips. I can't undo the past. I can't fix the pain. But I want to try, if you'll let me. His eyes were pleading, full of guilt and longing for a chance that life had almost denied him. The boy took a deep breath, feeling the clash of emotions within him. Anger and hurt battled with the small spark of hope, the longing to reconnect with the father he had dreamed about for years. He wanted to forgive, yet he also wanted the man to feel the weight of abandonment, to know that absence leaves invisible wounds that never truly heal. For a moment, they simply stood there, two souls connected by blood but divided by years of pain. The wind whispered through the trees, and even the birds seemed to pause, as if waiting for the next step. The boy's fists unclenched slowly, and his shoulders relaxed just a fraction, sensing that the millionaire was finally seeing him, not as a problem, not as a stranger, but as the child he had created. The millionaire reached out a trembling hand, unsure if the boy would accept it, unsure if forgiveness was even possible. The boy met that hand with a mixture of caution and curiosity, feeling the first real touch of the father he had imagined for so many lonely nights. A spark of connection ignited, fragile but undeniable, showing that even the deepest wounds could begin to heal. Yet the clash of emotions was far from over. Anger and hope continued to swirl together, creating tension, but also a strange sense of understanding. Both father and son realized that they could not erase the past, but they could confront it, acknowledge it, and perhaps begin to move forward, step by step, word by word, gesture by gesture. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the gravestones, the millionaire and the boy stood facing each other, hearts heavy but opening slowly. The clash of emotions had brought truth to the surface, and truth, however painful, was the first step toward reconciliation. For the first time, both of them understood the cost of silence, the power of acknowledgement, and the possibility that even the deepest rifts could someday be bridged. The cemetery remained quiet, almost reverent, as if the world itself had paused to watch what was about to unfold. The boy looked directly at the millionaire, his eyes steady, unflinching, carrying years of pain that had never been spoken aloud. There's something you need to understand, he began, his voice calm but firm. you don't just abandon a child. You leave a life behind, and that life changes forever. The millionaire swallowed hard, his throat tight, guilt pressing down on him like a heavy stone. He had known that coming here would not be easy, that the past would confront him, but hearing it spoken with such clarity, so raw, made it impossible to look away. I never meant to, he started, but the words died in his mouth, feeling inadequate, meaningless in the face of the truth before him. The boy shook his head slightly, his gaze unwavering. It's not about intentions anymore. It's about what happened. You left me alone, in the cold, in hunger, in fear. You left me with nothing but questions and pain. Do you understand that? His words cut through the air like a knife, and for the first time, the millionaire truly felt the weight of his choices, not just the financial or social consequences, but the human cost, the personal cost, the life he had broken. Tears welled up in the millionaire's eyes as memories he had tried to bury returned with full force. He remembered the little boy sitting on the floor, waiting for him to come home, the small meals he had left untouched, the lonely nights filled with silent sobs, the faces of every moment he had missed, birthdays, school events, laughter that should have been shared, and the nights when the child had hoped, prayed, and waited for him, moments he could never recover. I see it now, he whispered, his voice trembling. I see what I lost. I see what I caused, and I'm sorry. I don't know if that's enough. I don't know if it ever will be. His hands shook, reaching out instinctively, wanting to touch, to hold, to make amends in ways words could never. The boy felt the sincerity in his tone, but the hurt ran deeper than apologies, deeper than remorse, deeper than he could even express. The boy's gaze softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. I survived. I lived. But you have to know, surviving doesn't mean forgetting. Every day I asked myself why. Every night I wondered if you ever thought about me. Every choice I made, every danger I faced, it all had your shadow over it. I learned to fight, to hide, to be strong, because I had no one else. Do you understand that? The millionaire nodded slowly, swallowing the lump in his throat. I do. I can't imagine it, the fear, the loneliness, the hunger, the nights you must have cried alone, he said, his voice breaking under the weight of the realization. I was wrong. I failed you, and nothing I've done in all these years can take that away. The boy stepped closer, letting the truth hang in the air, heavy but necessary. I didn't need you to fix me. I needed you to see me. To know me. To know the person you abandoned is still here. Still standing. Still human. That's all I wanted. His words carried both sorrow and quiet strength, a truth that could not be ignored. The millionaire closed his eyes for a moment, letting the pain wash over him, acknowledging the truth he had spent decades avoiding. Every memory of neglect, every small cruelty, every absence he had justified in his mind now slammed against him like a tidal wave. The boy was right, he had left a life behind, and that life had shaped the person before him today, strong, resilient, and painfully aware of what it meant to be forgotten. I see you, the millionaire said finally, his voice trembling but sincere. I see the person you've become, because of everything I failed to give you. I cannot change the past. I cannot bring back the years lost, but I want to try to be here now, if you'll let me. His eyes searched the boy's face for a sign, a flicker of hope, anything that said he could still matter. The boy looked down for a moment, letting the weight of years sink in, then he looked back up, meeting the millionaire's gaze, and for the first time, the anger that had burned for years softened, just enough to allow a sliver of connection. It won't be easy, he said quietly, and I won't forget. But, maybe we can start here. Start now. That's all I ask. The cemetery, silent and solemn, held that truth between them, a painful truth spoken, a past confronted, and the fragile first step toward understanding, forgiveness, and perhaps, one day, reconciliation. Both knew the journey ahead would be long, but acknowledging the pain was the beginning, and sometimes, beginnings were all one could hope for. The air between them felt lighter, yet charged with tension. The cemetery, once cold and heavy with grief, seemed to soften under the late afternoon sun, casting warm streaks across the gravestones. For the first time since their meeting, both father and son could breathe without the suffocating weight of the past pressing down on them. The boy's eyes searched the millionaire's face, looking for signs of sincerity, and in those eyes, he finally saw something he hadn't dared to hope for: regret, honesty, and the faintest flicker of love that had never completely vanished. He had spent so many years preparing for confrontation, but now, standing here, he realized that this moment could be more than confrontation. It could be a beginning. "I've waited a long time for this," the boy said softly, his voice carrying the calm strength of someone who had faced life alone, not for revenge, not for anger, just to be seen, to be acknowledged. His words hung in the air, honest and unshakable, making the millionaire shiver at the truth they carried. The millionaire nodded slowly, tears tracing clean lines down his face. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, yet I hope, somehow, I can make things right," he whispered. "I can't change what I've done, but I can choose what happens next. I can try to be the father I should have been." His hands, trembling, reached out slightly, hesitant, almost afraid the boy would pull away. For a moment, the boy didn't move, the years of pain holding him still, but then, as if a switch had flipped, he stepped forward, letting the gap between them shrink, letting the first fragile thread of connection take root. "Actions speak louder than words," he said quietly. "If you really want to be here, then show me." There was no accusation in his tone, only a challenge, an invitation to rebuild trust brick by brick. The millionaire's hand met the boy's for the first time, not a grasp of obligation, but of understanding, a tentative bridge between the past and the present. Both felt a strange, electric energy in that touch, a mixture of relief, fear, and hope. The boy realized that for the first time in years, he was no longer invisible, no longer forgotten, while the millionaire felt the weight of responsibility shift from abstract regret to real opportunity. They walked together slowly along the cemetery path, neither speaking at first, letting silence fill the gaps that words could not. Each step was a step toward connection, toward rebuilding a relationship that had been broken for far too long. The millionaire pointed out the flowers his wife had loved, sharing stories he had never told anyone else, small glimpses of a life that had gone on without the boy. The boy listened, not judging, not interrupting, simply absorbing, realizing that this was the start of understanding, the start of something fragile but alive. The turning point did not come with dramatic words or grand gestures, but in small, quiet acts, in the shared memories, in the acknowledgement of pain and survival. The boy began to feel the first flicker of something he hadn't felt in years: trust, cautious but real. The millionaire, meanwhile, felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: a chance to repair, to reconnect, to make amends in ways that mattered. As the sun began to dip lower, painting the sky with streaks of orange and gold, the boy finally spoke again. "I don't know if we can fix everything, and I don't know if I can forget everything, but we can start somewhere, and that's all I need for now." His words were simple, but they carried the power of survival, resilience, and hope. The millionaire nodded, unable to speak at first, overcome with emotion. But the nod itself said everything, agreeing to try, to walk the road ahead together. They stood together, two figures connected by blood and choice, both aware that the journey would be long, that mistakes of the past could not simply be erased, but also that something new could grow here, something neither time nor neglect could destroy, a fragile, fragile bond that could, in time, become strong again. In that moment, the turning point had arrived, not with grand drama or loud confessions, but with understanding, presence, and willingness. The boy's journey of survival had intersected with the millionaire's journey of regret, and together, they had taken the first step toward a future neither had dared to imagine. The cemetery was quiet now, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, casting long shadows over the gravestones. The air felt lighter, warmer, almost as if the world itself acknowledged the change that had just begun between father and son. The boy and the millionaire stood side by side, a distance between them, yet closer than they had ever been before, connected by a fragile thread of understanding, trust, and shared history. The boy looked at his father, the man who had once been absent, and saw not just a figure of regret, but a person willing to try, willing to acknowledge the past, willing to step into the life he had abandoned. For the first time in years, the boy allowed himself to hope, not blindly, not without caution, but hoped that the gap between them could be bridged, that he could belong somewhere, even if imperfectly. "I don't know what comes next," the boy said quietly, voice soft, carrying both vulnerability and strength. "I've lived alone for so long. I've learned to depend on myself. But I want to see if we can, try, together." His words were simple, yet they carried the weight of years of pain, resilience, and courage. The millionaire nodded slowly, tears glistening in his eyes. "I don't know what the future will look like either," he admitted, "but I want to be part of it. I want to help you, support you, and maybe, learn how to be the father I should have been." They walked slowly through the rows of gravestones, sharing stories, some long forgotten, some painful, and some hopeful. The boy learned about his father's life after leaving, about mistakes made, lessons learned, and regrets carried silently, while the millionaire learned about the boy's journey, the hardships endured, the courage it took to survive, and the resilience that had shaped him into the young man standing there today. It was not an easy conversation, nor was it free from tears, anger, or frustration, but for the first time, they were honest with each other, honest about the past and honest about what they wanted for the future. The boy realized that the man before him was flawed, human, and full of remorse, but also capable of change, capable of love, and capable of being present in ways he had never been before. The turning point became more real as they spoke, as they listened, as they shared small, meaningful gestures. An arm placed carefully on a shoulder, a hand offered for support, a laugh at a memory long buried. Each act, each word, was a step toward rebuilding what had been broken, slowly, patiently, yet with growing confidence. The millionaire reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope, worn at the edges. He handed it to the boy with a trembling hand. "I kept this all these years," he said, voice low, "letters your mother wrote when you were a baby. I never had the courage to give them to you until now. Maybe they can help you understand we loved you, even if I failed to show it properly." The boy took the envelope, his hands shaking slightly, feeling the weight of the past and the tenderness of a gesture long overdue. A silence settled over them, comfortable this time, not heavy, but filled with possibility. The boy opened the envelope and began to read, the words bridging decades, healing small cracks, and allowing a connection to grow. Finally, he looked up, eyes meeting his father's, a small smile forming, cautious but real. "I think we can try," he said, voice soft but certain. "I think this is a beginning." The millionaire smiled back, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and quiet joy washing over him. "Yes," he said, "a beginning. And I promise I will do everything I can to make it right, step by step, day by day." They both knew the journey ahead would be long, filled with challenges and moments of doubt, but now they had something they had never had before: acknowledgement, presence, and the willingness to rebuild. As they walked out of the cemetery together, side by side, the boy felt a weight lift from his shoulders, a burden he had carried for years finally shared. The millionaire felt hope he had never dared to feel before, hope that family, even when broken, could be repaired, and that love, though delayed, could still grow. The cemetery, once a place of sorrow and memory, now became a symbol of beginnings, a place where the past was acknowledged, and the future could start. They stepped into the evening light, not as strangers, not as enemies, but as father and son, beginning the slow, beautiful process of understanding, healing, and reconnecting. For the first time in years, both of them felt something they had longed for: belonging, hope, and the knowledge that no matter how dark the past, new beginnings were always possible.